What's going on, guys? Solomonster here with you on a Tuesday afternoon. There's been a lot of craziness going on over the last few days. Of course, WrestleMania weekend now in the books, and I'm going to be talking about a lot of this stuff on Sunday, but I wanted to just get into a discussion here for a little bit about what's going on with this whole Endeavor WWE situation. There's been a lot of talk about Vince McMahon over the last 24 hours. So I didn't really want to hold everything until Sunday. You know, this was really a historic weekend for WWE. It really was. And they certainly were not shy about touting all of their different business accomplishments of this past weekend. They smashed all kinds of records, over $21 million at the gate for WrestleMania this weekend, over $20 million in sponsorship revenue and attendance, or so they claimed, for both nights of WrestleMania, of 161,000 people at SoFi Stadium, which would be a record for them. And, you know, look, while it wasn't perfect, I thought that this was overall a very good WrestleMania. In fact, the best WrestleMania that I have seen in probably a decade, going back to WrestleMania 30. So it was a very successful weekend for the company, which is why, in light of everything that has happened over the last several hours, going back to Raw last night, it is extremely discouraging, if you are a fan of WWE, to see and read and hear about what is going on. It is depressing. But it was a historic weekend, not only because of all of the business accomplishments that they were touting, but it also seemed to be, at least before last night, it seemed to be the final WrestleMania that we had under the ownership and control of the McMahon family. McMahon family has run this company going back 70 years. You can trace the roots of this company back to Vince's father or his grandfather back in the early 50s. 7 decades of McMahon control in this company. It was in 1982 that Vince bought the company from his dad for $1 million. And here we are now in 2023, and he is merging it with UFC to form a new live events company worth $21 billion. And so ends I said it last night, so ends the last vestige of the territory era, at least in this country. Because the announcement came on Monday, it was formalized that Endeavor would be acquiring WWE and combining it with UFC to form a new company that, as of yet, has no name. Some people have seen the name Newco being floated around. That is a temporary name. That is not going to be the new name of the company. But the new company is valued at $21 billion, with $12 billion of that value coming from UFC, the other $9 billion coming from WWE. The deal is not yet final. This has not yet actually happened, but the deal is expected to be finalized and go through by the end of the year. But I want to show you a shot here, for which I'm sure, you know, many of you, I'm sure, have seen. And let me just bring this up here, because we're going to be reading from an article here in just a little bit, but I want to bring this up. This is the site that greeted us yesterday morning. You talk about the stuff of nightmares here. We were greeted by this site on CNBC. I would like to introduce you to Vincenzo McMahon. Either that or Gomez Adams. I'm not sure. One or the other. This was from CNBC yesterday, an interview that Vincenzo did with Ari Emanuel, the CEO of Endeavor. They did a sit-down interview with one of the reporters from CNBC. And by the way, the fact that we are going to have WWE and UFC effectively being merged into one or under one umbrella, it's very amusing to me. Because if you remember, there was an infamous interview many years ago on a podcast called The Art of Wrestling, where Colt Cabana had CM Punk on his podcast, and I heard that there was a little bit of fallout from that podcast. But one of the stories that Punk told when he was on that podcast was many years ago, he was going to walk Chael Sonnen into the cage. There was a UFC fight that Chael was having in Chicago, and Punk was WWE champion at the time, and he wanted to walk him to the ring, and it was Vince McMahon who put the kibosh on that and said, "Oh no, UFC. I mean, that's just barbaric. mean, somebody's going to die. And so he wouldn't let Punk do it. And it's amusing to me because now here we are all these years later, and these two entities are merging. Funny how quickly things can change. But I do want to just point your attention here, and I'm sure a lot of you already are aware of the basics of what's going on. Some of you are not. Some of you don't live and die on social media and wrestling news websites, and may only keep it here to this channel here to get your news. But this was, CNBC really were the first ones to break this news. Obviously, they got the interview with the two of them. Well, this is the interview right here. But they had an article up here about the news, and I just want to run through some of the key points here to be aware of. This is really the kind of the nuts and bolts, the most important stuff when it boils down to what this deal means. WWE and UFC are going to be run as separate entities owned by the same new parent company. Endeavor is going to own 51%, and WWE stockholders will have their current stock transferred into 49% ownership of this new company. WWE will no longer trade on the stock exchange. The new company will, at the appropriate time, trade under the initials TKO. The new board of directors will have 6 members named by the Endeavor side, 5 by WWE. WWE, you may be aware, is moving into new headquarters in Stamford. They put a lot of money into this new building that they're all going to be working out of. That has not changed. WWE headquarters will be where they are calling home base, and UFC has their own headquarters. None of that is going to change as far as their offices are concerned. Ari Emanuel, who is the owner of Endeavor, he'll be the chief executive officer. Vince McMahon is going to be the executive chairman of the new company. Nick Khan is going to continue on as the president of WWE. And once this deal is finalized, Nick Khan is going to get a $10 million bonus. Paul Levesque is going to receive a $5 million bonus. And if for whatever reason this deal is not done by January of 2024, again, they expect it to be finalized by the end of the year. If for some reason it is not, though, by next January, then the two sides have the right to cancel the agreement. I don't see that happening, but that is at least possible. This is not a cash deal. Endeavor, I don't believe, is spending any cash out of pocket for WWE. This is an all-stock deal. And according to the transaction agreement, Vince McMahon, and this is key, this is actually a very important part of this entire thing, Vince McMahon is going to lose his preferred stock voting power. So he would have no more voting power per share than any other shareholder. You know, whenever we, up to this point, have heard about Vince's shares in the company, people asking, can he be ousted, you know, when he was still in full power? Is there anything anybody can do to get rid of Vince McMahon? Can he be voted out? And the question is no, or the answer is no. Even though he only owns a third of the company, his shares give him 80% of the voting power. Just the way that it's structured. It's like his shares are supercharged, and it pretty much gives him all the power. That will no longer be the case once this deal goes through. That will no longer be the case. UFC President Dana White issued this statement. He said, "This company has been on fire for the last 7 years, and now that we will be adding WWE to the portfolio, I am excited to take this to another level. Vince is a savage in the wrestling space. Ari is a beast at what he does, and then add what we at UFC bring to the table, and there is no limit to what this company can accomplish in the next 5 years." When do we get the Power Slap crossover with WWE? That's what I'm wondering. You know, Vince McMahon, interestingly enough, in the hierarchy of things, is technically going to be above Dana. Now, it's not a case where he's necessarily Dana White's boss. But he will be above Dana in the pecking order here. You know, when it comes to these like mergers and you hear about mergers and acquisitions, and I do have to point one thing out about this article here before I take it off. Ari Emanuel in that interview on CNBC, he referred to that. He said this is going to be UFC 2.0 because, you know, they bought UFC many years ago, and you know, business-wise, UFC, it's grown since the deal was made. There are other people who may look at the deal and say it wasn't such a good thing, but certainly it did, you know, kind of supercharge their business. But I saw that quote about this being UFC 2.0, and I said, boy, I hope it goes a lot better than NXT 2.0 has. That was my first thought. I saw the 2.0 in there. I was having flashbacks to NXT 2.0. You know, mergers can go a lot of different ways. Mergers can be very bad. Need I remind you, if you are a longtime wrestling fan, of what happened with the AOL Time Warner merger as it relates to WCW. That wasn't per se what killed WCW, but it certainly didn't help matters. This does not mean that WWE and UFC are merging into a single entity. We're not getting, WWUFC, or we're not going to have, half a ring and half an octagon or anything like that. This would be more akin to New Japan and Stardom being brother and sister under the same parent, which would be Bushiroad. Bushiroad owns New Japan Pro Wrestling. Bushiroad owns Stardom, but they're run as separate entities. Now, there may be some crossover. We have the IWGP women's title. Mercedes is there, and she's working Stardom shows, but she also might defend the title on New Japan shows. So, yeah, there's definite synergy there. And I think there's going to be a lot of synergy now between WWE and UFC as well. But the MMA side of the business will continue to operate on its own as the MMA side of the business. The wrestling side of the business will be the wrestling side of the business. That is my understanding anyway about how this is all going to work. It's going to effectively be run separately. So Vincenzo got the deal that he wanted. Remember, we heard reports a few weeks ago that Vince was looking for $9 billion for WWE, and I see the $9 billion figure being thrown around. So he got the deal that he wanted. Endeavor bought UFC in 2016 for $4 billion. And I would love to hear from UFC fans, because I am not going to sit here and tell you that I am the biggest UFC fan. I haven't been following it as much in the last few years. It also feels to me like the level of star power for them is not there the way it used to be. So I am not as avid of a UFC follower as I used to be. But as far as whether or not the fans believe that this deal has been better for UFC than before they got purchased by Endeavor, I would be curious to hear from people who are fight fans who want to chime in on that. And I'm not even talking so much about the issue of fighter pay. I know that's a controversial issue. I know a lot of the fighters get paid dog shit, and that's been a very big issue. But the issue of fighter pay was there long before Endeavor took over. I don't think that was an issue that was, maybe it made it worse, but that's not really a new issue. I'm thinking more about the kind of basic operation of the company, the consumer-facing elements of the company that the fans would see and the fans would feel. How has that deal been? Because my sense is that Endeavor has been largely hands-off with the day-to-day of UFC, and they have allowed UFC to operate with a pretty high degree of autonomy. As far as WWE is concerned, for them, would that be a good thing or a bad thing? I guess it's just up to the individual, whether or not you think that's a positive or a negative. Before last night, I would have said that's a good thing. If they keep their hands out of the wrestling operations and let the wrestling people do what the wrestling people do, not that the product is always so great. It's never fully great or fully shit. But if you have people who are not necessarily well-versed in how to run a wrestling promotion, I would rather them let the wrestling people do the wrestling side of things. So before last night, I would have said that's a good thing if they're going to be relatively hands-off with things. Obviously, if they start meddling in things and start nickel and diming them to death, and now we start hearing about cuts, that would not be a good thing. If you work there, if you're office staff, if you're talent, right, they start making cuts and trying to save money, that would not be a good thing. They could always look to consolidate certain positions and divisions, and honestly, that's something that's pretty typical in mergers and acquisitions. You read about that a lot. When you hear about other mergers, you hear about eliminating redundancy, right? That's a word that people like using. So I would expect that in this situation. As far as certain jobs being eliminated, I would think that that's probably a given. As far as Vince McMahon still being involved post-merger, nobody should be surprised by this. Absolutely nobody should be surprised by this. Despite whatever he tells Nick Khan, and whatever Nick Khan goes out there and starts regurgitating to people, whenever he's doing one of these podcasts or he's doing one of these television interviews, right? He was just on another podcast, sports podcast the other day. And we've heard Nick Khan many times go out there and say, Vince, he's only back because he wants to, he wants to make sure that it's the right partnership and it's the right strategic, investment. And he's only back to oversee a sale and he's not going to be involved in anything else, right? We heard him saying that in January, and I joked about it on Sunday. I said, in January, this is what Nick Khan said. And then the other day here in March, when he was asked, his answer was on Creative, he goes, well, he's really not that involved, right? And I said, give it a couple of months and let's see what his answer is in May. Little did I know I wouldn't have to wait more than a few days to get that answer. So no matter what Vince goes to Nick Khan and tells him to go out there and say, and clearly Endeavor was not going to stand in his way. One thing that was very obvious from the interview that Vince and Nick Khan did on CNBC is the fact that Ari Emanuel and Vince McMahon are very good friends. And he said as much. They have a friendship and a relationship that goes back over 20 years, right? They're like bosom buddies. That coupled with the fact that when Dana White smacked his wife and it was caught on camera, that Dana White is still working there and Endeavor didn't step in to say, you know what, you need to step down. Or you know what, we're going to go a different way and replace you. This is a bad look. You're launching a power slap league and they got you on camera slapping your wife. You're gone. They didn't do that. Instead, Dana White did a press conference and said, what good would it do if I stepped down? What good would it do if it left the UFC? All I would be doing is hurting the company. I don't want to hurt the company by stepping down. It's like these people live in their own world. They live in their own world where they feel like they are not accountable. Endeavor certainly didn't step in and do anything about it, right? Dana White's still there. So why would anybody think that they would step in here and anything would really, be any differently? I had to sit here and listen to Ari Emanuel on CNBC when he was asked, well, did you want Vince to come back? Was that, contingent on, the deal is contingent on him still being around? And he was like, yeah. He even joked. He said, I was going to body slam him if he was ready to walk away. He's like, absolutely, I wanted Vince. He's a visionary. He's this, he's that. He's a fellow billionaire, right? Of course. I don't want him to go anywhere. I want him to be a part of this deal. Vince is sitting there with, the big smile on his face and the mustache that goes this way and then down this way. And they're just sitting there and they're smiling, they're yucking it up. If Disney or Amazon or Comcast or anybody else would have been interested in WWE, and supposedly there were 6 offers, 6 legitimate offers, according to Darren Ravel of CNBC, that WWE had. He didn't say who the entities were, if the Saudis were involved, or if Comcast made an offer, right? Because supposedly Comcast wasn't interested. But there were up to half a dozen legitimate offers made that WWE could have considered. And I don't think they ever seriously considered any of them except the one that they ended up making. But if any of those companies thought that Vince McMahon carried too much baggage, and they said, we want to make this deal. We want to be in the WWE business, but we can't have him here. There's too much baggage there, right? It's too recent. We don't want that look. We don't want the headaches. Or maybe they feel like, maybe he's lost a step when it comes to certain aspects of the business. But whatever their reasons were, we don't want him to be a part of this company if we go ahead and buy the company. That deal was never going to be made. That deal was never, ever going to be made because the deal that was made because Vince McMahon could be exactly in the position that he is in right now. That is why he buddied up to his old pal Ari and they made the deal with Endeavor. Because Vince McMahon knew, I get to stay. And with some of these other companies, perhaps he wouldn't have been able to stay. Now, whether you believe that Nick Khan, when he talks in public, is lying or he's not lying, he's just, again, he's going with the bullshit that Vince McMahon has fed to him. It's very important to make this point. It was never about doing what is best for the business. We've heard that expression used before. WWE even incorporated it into their television show, right? We do what's best for business, right? The authority does what's best for business. This was never about that. This was never about doing what is best for the business. This was about doing what is best for the business and for Vince McMahon. And what was best for both parties was the deal that they made here. That's all this ever was. That's all this ever was. This was never a case, let's make the deal and I'll step away and I'll go back home and I'll go back into retirement. That was never going to happen. Now on CNBC, Vince was asked about remaining in creative control. This was only just yesterday. Now, I think they recorded this a few days ago, but it aired yesterday. And they asked him about creative. Are you still going to be involved in the WWE creative process? Vince McMahon, and I noticed this immediately. Before he even answered the question, he noticeably paused, like he had to think of what he was going to say. If the answer is obvious, you answer the question instantly. You don't take 2, 3, 4 seconds to think about, well, how should I answer this? What's the most diplomatic way to answer this? How can I bullshit my way out of this? He paused, and he said, well, yes and no. He said yes and no, and then said that he would remain at a higher level, but he would not be in the weeds like he used to be. I have this picture in my head of a fucking peeping Tom kneeling in the bushes in the weeds. That's what Vince McMahon has been doing since the end of July. He's been kneeling down in the bushes with a pair of binoculars looking in through the window like a peeping Tom, plotting his comeback, plotting his next move. Well, I'm not going to be in the weeds anymore, right? And I pointed this out yesterday. I tweeted this out yesterday morning, and a lot of other people have tweeted the same thing. This idea of being at a higher level, not being in the weeds the way I used to be. This is the exact language that he used in 2019 when he appointed Paul Heyman as the executive director of Monday Night Raw, and he made Eric Bischoff the executive director of WCW, the executive director of SmackDown. I will always link Eric Bischoff and WCW, so you'll have to excuse me. But he made them the executive directors. And it wasn't some bullshit storyline position. In fact, it was never even acknowledged on television. It was a legitimate position. And he was going to give them supposedly a certain level of autonomy over creative, and more so with Heyman, but with Bischoff, he was bringing him in also because they were going to Fox, and Bischoff had television experience before. So he created these positions and he appointed them to these positions. Eric Bischoff did not even last 4 months. When SmackDown finally debuted that fall on Fox, he was already gone. He moved his family all the way from Wyoming to Connecticut, and it's like the Simpsons meme where it was a Grandpa Simpson walks into the bar and he puts his puts his hat on the coat rack, and he immediately turns around, grabs his hat, and leaves. That was Eric Bischoff's last run in WWE. Paul Heyman lasted a little bit longer, but he barely lasted a year. And when Vince fired him from that position, he stayed on as a talent. He's like, well, Vince, he said you did a great job. Yeah, you did such a great job. Now I'm going to fire you. Oh, that makes a lot of sense. Those two guys didn't even last a full year in those positions, and Vince was supposedly going to stay out of the weeds. We all know how that turned out. This is the pattern when it comes to this man. He's been in this position for so long, 4 decades of running the show, and the vision for the show and creative has been his vision this entire time. Doesn't matter if he brings in people, Bruce Pritchard, Vince Russo, Ed Ferrara, Paul Heyman, Eric Bischoff, any other writer you want to name, Brian Gewirtz. At the end of the day, it's his vision. He approves what we see on television. If it makes television, it's because Vince McMahon approved it. If he doesn't want it on the show, it's not on the show. If you come up with an idea, he doesn't like it, he'll rip it up and he'll rewrite it himself to make sure that it's something he likes, to make sure that it's something that he's amused by. How many stories over the years have we heard of writers who write shit for Vince? They're writing for an audience of one, right? We've heard that expression before. Writers come and go. They get interviewed about their run because a lot of writers don't last very long. There's a lot of turnover in that company when it comes to the writing team. And they'll say, a lot of them write for an audience of one. We're writing for the old man to make sure that he likes it and that he laughs. If we can get a laugh out of him, we know we did our job. Yeah, but what about the rest of us that don't laugh at his stupid jokes? What about the rest of us that are fans of the product and have been for a long time? We watch Raw 2 hours at the time. Now it's 3 hours every single week, right? Has been for a decade. SmackDown, Raw, NXT. We're watching these shows. We're sitting here. What about us? I thought it was a very fan-friendly company. I thought what the fans wanted mattered. Apparently not. All that ever matters is what Vince McMahon wants. So it's hard for him to pull himself away and cede control to other people, because how many people would give up control willingly, right? You have to be pulled kicking and screaming. Nobody can do that, though, because his voting shares and everything, right? Nobody can do it. So he's the king on top of the throne, and nobody was really able to do anything about it. This man is a control freak. He is a control freak who will never fully cede power. If he has the power to do anything about it, he will never cede power, especially creatively, to someone else. He will never allow somebody else to take his baby and reimagine it in their own way. Triple H is finding that out right now. Triple H can come out on television and he can cut all the rah-rah speeches he wants to. He could sit there with his glasses on and his headset on at the gorilla position and act like he's the one running the show. As we have found out, based on last night, that is not the case. And frankly, I wouldn't be surprised to find out that wasn't the case with a lot of what we saw on night 2 of WrestleMania. But certainly for last night, and we'll get to that in a little bit, that was not the case, where it was the Triple H show, even though he showed up at the beginning of the show. Now, when asked by a reporter, or the reporter in the interview, whether last summer's hush money scandal helped push a sale along quicker than he would have liked, McMahon said that it didn't, and then he said, "I've made mistakes, personally and professionally. Throughout my 50-year career, I have owned up to every single one of them, and then I have moved on." You have owned up to every single mistake that you've ever made, and then you've moved on. The one thing Vince McMahon can't seem to be able to do is move on. I mean, that's way down at the bottom of the list of things that Vince McMahon is able to do. He is incapable of moving on. That's the problem. But I love this idea that he's always been accountable for any mistakes that he's ever made, whether it's, personal failures or creatively or anything like that. How many times has this man made other people over the years the scapegoat? When things go wrong, it's never his fault. It's always somebody else's fault. We'll replace this person. We'll fire this guy. We'll bring in a new one. And we have to listen to this. "Oh, I've always been accountable for the mistakes that I've made." Only a week or two ago did he even pay back the $17 million in hush money to shut up all of the women that he, I don't even know what words you would use, had fun with. But I guess the money's all paid back now, so all is well. This man has never been accountable for anything in his life. He's never had to be. That's the problem. And also, let me put this up on screen. This right here. I wanted to bring this up. July 22nd, 2022. At 77, time for me to retire. Thank you, WWE Universe, then, now, forever, together. This was the supposed Vince McMahon retirement. Even when this guy wrote to the board of directors only a number of months ago to tell them that he wanted back into the company, months after he wrote this tweet, we found out that he wrote to the board of directors to let them know, "I want back in." And you know what the board said? They had no issue with him going ahead and overseeing a possible sale, but they said, "We don't think it's in the best interest of this company for you to come back in any other capacity at this time." The board of directors of this company told this man, "We don't believe it is in the best interest of this company for you to come back." And he spit in their faces and said, in so many words, "I don't give a shit what you want. This isn't about what you want. This is about what I want." Actions speak louder than words. His actions don't match up to the words coming out of his mouth. Talking about accountability. Accountability. What about the reports from a few months ago that he was having, he was feeling angry and upset because he felt he was given bad advice. And that's the only reason why we saw this tweet in the first place. You think this fucking guy woke up? It's 4:05 p.m. in the timestamp there. You think at 4 o'clock on what I believe was a Friday, this man just up and decided, "You know what? I'm 77 years old. I think it's time to retire. I think I'm going to go to my yacht. I've had about enough of this. Good luck, Paul." No, he felt like he was given bad advice by people who actually did have the best interest of the company in mind, and they could see that this could potentially be a disaster for a company heading into television rights negotiations, for a company touting all of their new sponsors, more sponsorship revenue for WrestleMania this year, right, than any other year. There were people around him who said, you need to do the right thing and step down. So he begrudgingly did, and then later on regretted it because it wasn't my fault. It was other people who gave me bad advice. Owning up to his faults. Give me a fucking break. Now, I see concern, rightfully, on social media and other places, about what this could mean as far as pay-per-views, right? People who are UFC fans are well aware of the fact that only a few months ago, UFC jacked up the price of their pay-per-views to $80. It's like every year, it feels like they keep jacking up the prices of those shows. But people were concerned after comments that Nick Khan made earlier this week about that, and knowing about the, again, the increase in the pay-per-view charges, also with the fact that you have to pay for an ESPN Plus subscription. So if you want to buy, let's say, UFC 300, let's say, you have to have a subscription. I think it's $10 a month to ESPN Plus. And on top of that, you would pay the $80 for whatever that pay-per-view is that weekend. So that with UFC, that's how it works. And that set off alarm bells for a lot of people. Because right now, if you have a Peacock subscription, and I think there's different tiers to Peacock. I think you can have a $5 a month subscription or a $10 a month. But you pay for your Peacock subscription and that's it. You put Peacock on and you can watch WrestleMania. You can watch Royal Rumble. You can watch all of the big shows and not have to pay an additional fee. And so is WWE going to, move to a UFC type of model now that they are under the auspices of Endeavor? And Nick Khan said, look, it's not anything that we're exploring at the moment, but if you're asking me, would we be open to those conversations and would we be potentially interested in that? Then he said the answer is yes. So like if NBC Universal wants to renew with WWE and they're going to have those conversations very soon, it's entirely possible that if NBC Universal said, well, you know what, this time around, maybe we'll upcharge and it'll be $50 or $60 for all of the key pay-per-views. WWE would probably be okay with that. If a new deal hinged on that, they're definitely open to that happening. However, there is something else that is very interesting here. And again, this was another Nick Khan interview. And so let me bring that story up here because this was from Axios. WWE, UFC could pursue combined streaming deal. And this, I feel like this was a story that kind of went under the radar a little bit. So let me just browse through this one here, and we'll take a look at what Nick Khan had to say as far as this is concerned. Now, WWE and UFC will pursue separate media rights negotiations for linear TV, but there could be an opportunity to pursue a combined streaming deal, CEO Nick Khan told Axios in an interview on Monday morning. Article mentions the WWE streaming deal with Peacock expires in 2026. UFC's media deal with ESPN, which includes giving ESPN Plus the exclusive rights to all pay-per-view matches, expires in 2025. Asked whether WWE and UFC would consider a combined streaming rights deal. Once those agreements expire, Khan said, the good folks at NBCU have been tremendous partners to us, so let's see what they have to say. WWE's current linear TV rights with NBC Universal and Fox expire next year. Its streaming deal with NBC Universal's Peacock is up in 2026. UFC signed a 5-year TV contract with ESPN in 2019 that was extended through 2025. Khan said the companies would be pursuing those TV deals differently. Said the most important thing from NBC and Fox and from WWE's point of view, feels respected in the process. That's the most important thing. So we're going to enter those conversations with them. And the right of first refusal begins right now. So they're going to pursue separate television deals. But as far as, pay-per-views are concerned, that is up in the air right now. So if you are concerned about that, there's reason to be concerned. Is there reason to be concerned in the short term? No. As they mentioned in the story, the Peacock deal isn't up until 2026. UFC stuff is not up until 2025, although I think that might just be for TV. But if anything were to happen, I don't see this happening, certainly not this year, and maybe not even next year. Do I think that at some point that is going to happen? Do I think long-term into the future, that's where this is going? WWE is going to be charging you 50 or 60 bucks for WrestleMania, maybe in a couple of years? Yeah, probably. That's probably what's going to end up happening. And that's going to be up to you guys as far as whether or not you are big enough WrestleMania fans that you are willing to pay after not paying for so many years, right? A lot of us used to pay like it was nothing. WrestleMania would come and it's like, okay, it's 50 bucks, it's WrestleMania. But when you give it away to people for basically nothing for almost a decade, it's going to be difficult for a lot of people, especially if they're cash strapped, to justify the cost of, let's say, a Peacock subscription and then paying for the Royal Rumble on top of that, especially if we're talking about a Vince McMahon booked Royal Rumble. Can you imagine that? There's a lot of moving parts, as you can tell. There's a lot of moving parts to all of this stuff, things we still don't know. It's only been 2 days. So there's going to be a lot more coming out about this that you and I don't even know. As far as the cuts, I said potential for there to be cuts. Yeah, I think that's just, it's one of those kind of growing pains of a deal like this. I think, unfortunately, some people are probably going to end up out of work. Could it affect talent? Could there be talent cuts? Yes, it's possible that there could be talent cuts. In the longer term, year from now, 2 years from now, if business plummets, if there's some other big scandal, how Endeavor deals with that is going to be very interesting, because for the first time since he bought this company from his father, way back in 1982, this is the first time that Vince McMahon is going to have somebody above him that he has to answer to. Even if that person is a good friend of his and they're yucking it up on television and it's like they're best friends here, he now has somebody above him. He's not used to that. Vince McMahon has always been the head honcho. And now that's not going to be the way it works. Not only that, but he no longer has the cushion of his preferred stock. And to me, that is the most important thing here. The one thing that was shielding him, the one thing that was protecting him, is no longer there. Once this deal goes through, he loses that. He will no longer have that protection anymore. So, hopefully for his sake, him and his boy Ari stay tight like this, because it's kind of the ultimate can they coexist storyline. But now it's coming to fruition here in real life. Now, coming off of what I thought was a mostly great WrestleMania, WWE riding high. I feel like the fans were largely riding high. They were riding a wave of momentum into this year's WrestleMania show. And then we come to Monday Night Raw last night. And watching Monday Night Raw and the fallout from Monday Night Raw, what we have learned since then, was like a kick to the balls. It really was like a kick to the crotch. This was the worst post-WrestleMania episode of Raw ever that this company has ever produced. And frankly, it was one of the worst episodes of Raw, period. And I wasn't surprised to see the results of the Twitter poll that I put up from last night. I'll put it up again. This was the Raw poll from last night. With over 4,700 votes, I cannot remember a time where Raw got a number that low in the thumbs up column. Only 7% of people said thumbs up. And I'm starting to wonder if it was a bunch of Vince McMahon burner accounts. 81% of people gave that show last night a thumbs down. And you watched the television show and something just felt different. Something did not feel right watching that show last night. And we found out what that was when the show was over. And I mentioned this at the tail end of the stream. It was breaking news at the end of the stream last night. Mike Johnson had the report up on pwinsider.com. And I will read you just the key kind of components of this report here. Vince McMahon was personally and heavily involved with last night's episode of Monday Night Raw. according to PW Insider, who confirmed it with multiple sources. They were told that about 15 to 20 minutes before Raw went live last night on USA Network, a number of late rewrites for the episode were ordered, described as not feeling like the types of changes talent and staff had come to expect under Paul Levesque. Changes for the episode continued as the show went well into being on the air. I mean, if that isn't WCW-esque, I don't know what is. I mean, that has happened a lot over the years under Vince McMahon. But these stories, I mean, this goes back to the days of WCW and all the chaos when WCW was really starting to kind of spiral out of control. Oftentimes, Nitro, a 3-hour Nitro, would be on the air, and Bischoff and the crew would still be writing the show trying to figure out what is going to be happening in the second half. And it was just total chaos. Completely disorganized. That's happened quite a bit in recent years on Raw as well under Vince McMahon. Under Triple H, I can't remember a single time that a reputable outlet reported that there were late rewrites to the show. The script was torn up 2 hours before showtime. Not once. Not a case where Raw every single week was a home run, but it was kind of nice to know that they at least had a plan and they stuck to the plan and they weren't at the whims of a madman who was changing the show on the fly for no reason. All of a sudden now, here we go again. Vince McMahon is backstage. Vincenzo, he's got the headset on. He's back in the catbird seat. And here we are now hearing about rewrites while the show is on the air. I saw the video on social media of Seth Rollins standing in the ring during the commercial break. Seth Rollins came out on television last night. He was coming to the ring. The fans were singing him down to the ring, singing his song. And what happened? He stood in the ring for 4 minutes in a darkened arena during commercial. They came back from commercial. He stood in the ring 2 more minutes, and then he left. That was the entire segment. And somebody who was in the crowd last night uploaded a video clip of like 15 seconds of Rollins during the commercial while he was standing in the ring, and a bunch of production people at ringside kind of rushed over to tell him something, and he didn't look very excited by what they were telling him. Now, I don't know what the nature of the conversation was specifically. I don't know what they said to him verbatim, but he did not look happy, and that segment sucked. I was dumbfounded when that segment was over. I didn't know what I had just seen. I'm like, what was this? What was the purpose of this? And then he just went to the back and we never saw him again. This is the type of shit that you would expect under Vince McMahon. You don't need to be seated in the backstage area to see it with your own eyes. Just watch the show last night. You're going to tell me that that show felt like every other episode of Raw that we have seen in the last 8 or 9 months under Triple H? You're going to tell me that that had the feeling of the same Monday Night Raw under Triple H? What show have you been watching? So we had all of these rewrites going on. While McMahon stated he would not be in the weeds on creative in the CNBC interview, we were told by multiple sources who were at Raw that there was no doubt that Vince was firmly back in charge following the Endeavor acquisition of the company. PW Insider was told that the night began with Paul Levesque on headsets running the show, but as the taping went on, it was Vince McMahon who was more and more involved as the point person running the show. While McMahon was on headset producing a few times over the weekend, he was at the gorilla position for most of last night's Raw taping, directly overseeing the proceedings. Among some of the talent that we spoke with, there was a huge negative shift in morale. Gee, I wonder why. A huge negative shift in morale as they realized that things were going to go back to exactly the way they were before Paul Levesque assumed the position as the chief he should assume the position, all right. Yeah, Triple H is assuming the position right now. He's bent over. He's assuming a different position that he didn't sign up for. I guess him and the women who were paid the hush money over these many years now have something in common. But yes, he was assuming the position. One source said that the place felt nuked. Others didn't go that far. The feeling was that going forward, the likelihood was that McMahon would be overseeing everything again, leaving the creative once again to his whims and sensibilities, although whether that actually plays out remains to be seen. A big part of that feeling of resignation was that Levesque is genuinely well-liked and trusted by the talent, especially because so many of them have come through the NXT system under Triple H. You look at that roster right now. I don't know, as far as the total number of people they have on the main roster at this exact moment, but I would wager a bet that probably the majority of them have either come out of the NXT system or have come through the NXT system and worked for a period of time with Triple H when he was still the one down there, right? It is a very NXT influenced roster. So I can believe that. There's a certain comfort level that comes with working with someone, especially when they're not a crazy person. And naturally, you would want to work with that person and not work with the crazy person, right? Makes total sense. So there were a lot of people last night felt very deflated because they saw the writing on the wall. They could see where this is going, and they didn't like that feeling. But when it comes to last night's Raw, last night was an embarrassment. Last night's show was a total embarrassment, and it is depressing because, again, I don't want to sit here and tell you Monday Night Raw under Triple H the last few months has been great, man. It's like, it's like it was 20 years ago, 25 years ago. It's not. And it never will be, because Raw should not be 3 hours. This is not a company that is able to write a compelling, interesting 3-hour television show on a weekly basis. It can't happen. Under these people, it's not going to happen. However, I am willing to take a better Monday Night Raw than the one we had before over a perfect Monday Night Raw, because a perfect Monday Night Raw does not exist. And the show is better now, and it is more palatable now than it was a year ago. So I will happily take that version of Raw over the version of Raw that we had before. So it was just depressing when I saw this report come through because, it felt like, all right, at least now there's a new vision. There's hope. There's someone new. There's some new blood. I know Triple H has been there for years. It's weird to call him new blood, but it is. It is. For the first time, somebody was in that position and had the ability to make decisions that were not going to be second-guessed by the old man. And Triple H did put his stamp on things in some ways. We have seen less rematches, and he did bring back certain people who were let go. And I know a lot of those people have not worked out so far. Some of them have been a bust. Then you have people like a Bronson Reed and certain individuals who I think have impressed and who have done well. Has not been the case with all the talent, but a lot of those people never even had a first chance. So it was nice that, okay, I'm going to bring these guys and girls back. I'm going to give them a chance to try to get over, because they weren't even given a proper chance the first time. And there are other elements of the show that I think are better now under Triple H. The women's division, not the case. I still feel like that is one of his weak points. It's been very disappointing. I think that he has done overall a pretty poor job when it comes to the women's division on both shows. So there's pros and cons. There's pros and cons. But to see this playing out and hear about low morale and people, they're kind of now resigned to what this all means going forward. Look, if it makes me depressed, I can only imagine how it must make the people who work there feel. Michael Cole felt like he had new life and new energy to him on commentary after Vince went away, and he didn't have Vince in his ear yelling at him all the time. How must he feel? If Vince is really back and he's going to be on headset every week and micromanaging everything, I feel bad for someone like Michael Cole. And I feel bad then for all of us, because we then have to listen to Michael Cole on television every week. It's like a domino effect. It doesn't just affect one person. It affects all of us. Those are the people who I feel bad for. And you know what? These reports about how, let's wait until Friday, right? Because last night, Raw was in Los Angeles last night. And so on Friday, they're going to have SmackDown. And let's see if Vince McMahon is going to be at SmackDown. Maybe he was just, flexing his muscles backstage on Raw because he was in town for the whole sale thing and he just happened to be there, right? It doesn't matter. This is what people don't understand. It doesn't matter whether Vince McMahon is going to physically be there on Friday or not. He is back. He may as well just be the Invisible Man, even if he is not there on Friday. It doesn't matter. I don't want to hear it that, oh, well, he wasn't there on Friday, so everybody panicked for no reason. Don't be gullible. Don't be gullible. Whether he's physically there on Friday or not doesn't matter. Clearly, this man is back. And everything he and this company have ever said about him not being involved was a lie. Him going on Twitter last year and saying that I'm retiring, that was a lie. Everything this company has ever had a backstage meeting with talent to tell the talent or has told the production people has been a lie. Everything Nick Khan says when it comes to this stuff in these interviews is a lie. What Vince McMahon said to the board back then, that was a lie. What Vince McMahon said on television on CNBC yesterday about not being in the weeds on creative, that was a lie. You can't trust a fucking word out of these people's mouths. They have lied time and time and time again. And now we see after last night the end result of that. We see an example of what is going to probably happen going forward, and it sucks. The constant lying, the constant bullshit, on and on and on. No accountability. They can just say whatever they want. Also lied, by the way. I mean, I could go on and on about all the different lies. Those are the only ones that I had thought of. There's other lies as well. But those are the key ones. Lied about all these things. Lied about creative on television just a day ago. Only 24 hours ago. You don't have to go back very far. I could put the tweet back up on the screen if you want me to. Lies, lies, and more lies. And he did it with a shitty mustache and a smile. Then, now, and forever. Some things never change. I know you guys, some of you guys sent in some super chats, which I didn't even mention that at the beginning, but if you did, I appreciate that. I will read them here just before I get out of here. But I just wanted to talk about this. Obviously, we'll cover this more on Sunday on the main podcast, and I'm sure there'll be more that comes out between now and Sunday anyway. But I couldn't hold my tongue until Sunday because this is just annoying the crap out of me. So, as I'm sure it is many of you as well. Marcellus, thank you very much for the super chat. Rocky Road says Vince looks like the guy on the Tapatio hot sauce. I said Vince, he kind of also looks like somebody that you would see with a beret on his head bringing bread to someone's house. Zachariah Sitchin says that McMahon looks like he failed to capture pictures of Spider-Man. Spade Racing, ticker symbol TKO, they really like Mark Merrow. Nick Grasso, next big angle, WWE against UFC War Games. You know, I was only partially joking when I made the comment about WWE Power Slap. I mean, I'd like to say that that's never going to happen, but I can't really say that. It says, in all seriousness, though, this is such a bummer. I heard some talent are already looking to ask for their releases. Do you see a mass exodus coming? I don't. I mean, if there are people there who are under contract, then they're under contract. And I feel like how many times have we been in situations before where morale is down and people are just bummed, and you know, it's one of these things where if people are that unhappy, why don't the talent just ask to be released or rise up together in some way? And they never do. I don't see any sort of mass exodus, but will there be people who leave if their contracts are coming up or were considering going or going back who now have a change of heart? I'm seeing these reports about Jay White. Wasn't talked about at all this weekend, probably not going to WWE. Maybe he was never going to go to WWE. I thought that's exactly where he was going to end up. And if Jay White has not yet signed anything and was thinking about it, he better fucking run as fast as his feet will carry him. This is the last place that Jay White needs to be. So for his sake, I certainly hope he didn't sign anything yet. Roger Rubio, where would you rank Bayley's career accomplishments among the other four horsewomen? She's accomplished a lot, but I have her at the bottom of the list. I have her at number 4. And that's not because she's a bad performer. It's just that the other 3, just as far as accomplishments, I think have accomplished more than she has. Riagu, thank you for the super chat. Justin Logue with a couple of super chats here. Vince is a karma Houdini. Good does not always conquer evil. No good deed goes unpunished. Nice guys finish last. And Santa Claus is not real. He says, Vince may suck, but cats are still awesome. They are. Yes, cats are still awesome. Scott Woodford, Stevie Richards was a consultant for Fox and USA Network when that started with Eric and Paul. First timer TK waiting for the deal to sour so he can buy WWE. That'll be the next big announcement. The Chosen One with the 1999, thank you very much. Vince McMahon from your childhood is not the same Vince McMahon that runs WWE today. He is not even the same Vince that ran it in 2003 and 2004. People don't say he just got bad. He got out of touch. He got careless. And he got old. And when that happens, you lose a little bit of edge off your fastball. There's no shame in that. It happens to everybody. And it's just sad that he just is willing to hurt his own company, whether he realizes he's doing it or not. He might just be so delusional he doesn't think he's actually hurting his company because the company is still making a shit ton of money and just made a $9 billion deal here. But he is. And I don't know if it's just arrogance. I don't know if it's ignorance. I don't know. Maybe it's a combination of all of those things. Sad, though. Very sad. Harlem King. I can't do this anymore. I'm taking another extended break from WWE. Past few years, I've I've followed the news, and your channel will still tune in. I hope you do. If you don't want to watch anymore, you can still follow here. I'll keep you up to date on what's going on. Wrestle Park, Bayley might be done with WWE. No, that is a fake news item. Just so you know, to put that to bed. There are a lot of rumors going around about different people, but the Bayley thing is something that popped up on a fake Twitter account. So if you're seeing stuff about Bayley having asked for her release, she may be taking time off, but that is fake. That is not true. Aftermath, if you read between the lines, Ari helped Vince come back into power, and they were working on this deal since last year. Wrestle Park says Bayley's tweet during Raw and Dakota's tweet today. I did not see Dakota's tweet. But yeah, well, look, as far as the Bayley thing is concerned, I don't know what is going on with the tweet that she posted about when she said bye the other day, because we have so many wrestlers who post cryptic tweets, it's ridiculous. I mean, every other day there's a new cryptic tweet from a new wrestler, and usually it means nothing, so it's kind of hard to follow. But there was a Wrestle Purists fake Twitter account. There is a real Twitter account called Wrestle Purists. There's a fake one that had the Bayley asking for her release item. And even Sean Ross Sapp came out and said, I don't know why you're crediting this to Fightful. We did not report this. This is fake. So I'm just saying, if that's what you're referring to, it is not true. Samoan fan, did Vince make the call for Reigns to beat Cody Rhodes? No, I don't think he did. Would he have made the call? Probably. But no, that was... Apparently that was a plan that was already set in stone long before this weekend. Down bad. We'll know Vince is officially back when Baron Corbin starts appearing in every segment. Yeah. Or the 24/7 title is reinstated. Fallen Exposure. Solomonster, it has been a blast watching great wrestling again. Will I have to stop watching WWE again? I just tuned into you and JD. It looks that way. I mean, just watch the shows and judge for yourself. I'm not going to tell you what to do, but, JD will be here. I'll be here. So we'll still be covering the shows like we always do. But that's up to you. I would never tell somebody to just stop watching the show. That is entirely up to you. I would not stop watching because we had one terrible Raw. If it becomes a pattern and you don't want to subject yourself to it, I don't blame you. 3 hours of Raw every week is a very long time. But you will make that decision for yourself. Carnage Rage. If this is the case, I am going to stick with New Japan and Pro Wrestling Noah. Andrew Lima. When the deal is done, does this jeopardize the current deal with Peacock? Will WWE return to a more traditional pay-per-view option? We talked about that already. Dr. Dakota Scorpio, LA Knight and Lashley Mania segment was nixed. Again, that was from a Twitter account that I think was created in February. Judge for yourself. My advice to you is to be very careful with where you get your news from. Right? a Twitter account like WrestleVotes, which has been around for a little while now, it's not a new account, has proven to be reliable before. So when WrestleVotes says something, I talk about it on my show. There are other Twitter accounts, and I won't name what they are, that have popped up that people look at and they take them as reliable sources of news, and they're not. And it's hard to judge because there's a whole bunch of them that keep popping up. That came from one of those Twitter pages. So I don't know that that is necessarily true. Carolina Blood, do you think WWE will have a slap fight title? Give it time. Alex Ali, when does next Sound of Gamer drop? Is it next week? I was going to record one yesterday, and then the whole world went to hell here. So I'm hoping I get a chance to record episode 2 this week. And if I do, channel members will get it first, and then you guys will get it a few days later. But yeah, the first episode is up now for everybody. It's up on the channel. If you want a kind of relief from all of the doom and gloom here and all of this nonsense, you want to laugh a little bit, there's an hour-long Sound Off Gamer up right now. Bones Jones, how long until the Triple H rehires get fired again? What day is April 15th? Is that next Saturday? It's usually around that time they do their spring cleaning. Impact Sona. This sucks for me as my husband got us tickets to Raw in May and we can't get a refund. That does suck. Dan Haval. Vince just wants to be as rich as Elon and Bezos. See, again, this is not just about being rich. Vince has more money already than he'll ever be able to spend. It's not just about money. It's about power. It's about control. It's about his ego. Nobody has a bigger ego and nobody is a bigger control freak than Vince McMahon. I would even argue that is probably more important than the money for him. I think if you gave him $1 billion to just sit in his mansion and do nothing, he would go stir crazy. He wouldn't know what to do with himself. He'd be banging his head against the wall. It's not just about money with him. It's about all of the other things that I mentioned. Captain Rowdy. Vince and Hogan, the greatest liars in WWE history, forever linked for many reasons. Best always with the $10 super chat. You are the hardest working man of wrestling podcasts. There are a lot of people who are on YouTube and who do podcasts that have done great work this week. I would do even more. It's just that I'm kind of juggling different jobs here. So, but I appreciate that. It says, I know you got AEW and SmackDown this week, but take some time for you and treat yourself to a job well done. Best always. I appreciate that. Fallout. How does Tony Khan use this situation to his advantage? You know how Tony Khan can use this to his advantage? By making sure that he is putting out the best possible product that he can. Build goodwill with the fans, continue to build goodwill with the fans. And I think that honestly is what will attract people to his product, what will attract talent who may otherwise have wanted to go where they think the grass is greener, to maybe consider AEW instead. Now, the wrestling talent pool is relatively small. And he is competing with WWE for talent. WWE is competing with AEW for talent. Best thing he could do is focus on his product, put on the best show he possibly can. Treat your talent well. You're never going to be able to please everybody. There's going to be people who, again, cryptically tweet, I'm not being booked, right? I mean, there's people in AEW who do that, but that's the best thing that Tony Khan could do. Continue to build goodwill with his audience. 35 Antonio, Triple H's promo felt like a farewell. It may end up being one. Corey G. Rollins once said, I didn't sell out, I bought in. Behind the Fiends. I know this sounds crazy, but if I was Jay White, I would sign with Ring of Honor. He is a talent. Tony Khan could build that brand around and draw more interest to it. There are different contracts for Ring of Honor and AEW. If I'm Jay White, I'm signing an AEW contract, not a Ring of Honor contract. If Tony Khan wants to use him a little bit on the Ring of Honor brand, I think that's fine. But Jay White is too good to just sign a Ring of Honor contract and be relegated to 15,000 people on Honor Club. I mean, I'm sorry. He's better than that. Bret Hart, are you going to stop the Raw live streams? No, for now, we'll keep them going. Ask me that in a few months, though. Right now, though, we will continue doing them. AJ3, what will damage control be like now that Vince is back in charge? Control-Alt-Delete. I think damage control is done. Maze the Great, does all this mean the days of the live Raw reviews are now numbered? Numbered, maybe. They're not over. Numbered, possibly. Christian with the $8 super chat. How prevalent do you think until he dies type talk has to be in the locker room right now? Obviously, nobody in WWE wants Vince to die out loud, but that is essentially when he is done running creative. I don't think anybody is wishing death upon Vince. I shouldn't say anybody, but I am not wishing death upon Vince McMahon. What I am wishing is that Vince McMahon would have enough decency and common sense to step aside, enjoy the fruits of his labor, right? He's worked hard over these many years to amass that big pile of money that he has, and go ahead and enjoy it and take a less active role in the company. Nobody is saying he has to go home and be completely divorced from WWE. It's just that when he's in, he's all in. You hear it from everybody who knows him. He's a workaholic, right? He's got his fingers in everything, right? He's got his little shriveled up fingers in every single pie that there is. But I'm not wishing anybody death. Chris Miner, do you see Vince rehiring John Laurinaitis again? Anything's possible. Como Amosto. In all the years that you've covered wrestling, was there ever a time you were so fed up with WWE that you stopped watching for a period of time? Stopped watching completely? No. I've come close a few times. But I've never pulled the plug completely because I'm a wrestling fan. And being a wrestling fan, being a WWE fan is kind of like being a Mets fan, you know? You can say the same thing about being a Mets fan. Why continue to subject yourself to that level of torture after all of these years? Because I don't know any better. Because I'm a fan and I don't know any better, and I always used to say it on the podcast many years ago, the two H's, right? Habit and hope. I watch out of habit, and I hope it's going to get better. It's the same thing. Connor McKenna, if it wasn't for you and TikTok, I would have no idea what's going on in WWE. Keep up the good work. And Todd Warner, it's crazy. I asked about an emergency sound off the other day, and now this. Well, there you go. Ask and you shall receive. I guess you willed it into existence here. So thank you again for all of the super chats. That was very nice of you. But again, I just wanted to come on here and just address this here and now, what we know. It looks like there's a lot of other things going on behind the scenes. So any other news that comes out this week, we'll kind of bundle all of this up and go through it again on Sunday. We'll see what Tony Khan's big announcement is on Dynamite tomorrow night. He's got some sort of announcement that apparently has nothing to do with storylines or talent. It's not a new signing. It's nothing like that. So take your pick about what that could possibly be. Joshua just became a Sound of Legend channel member. Joshua, thank you very much. By the way, you know, as of this weekend, we have smashed our membership record. We are actually nearing 700 members on this channel after this past weekend. So we're getting close, but you guys have come out in full force. WrestleMania weekend was good for WWE, and it was a lot of fun for me here on this channel as well. Soccer J75 says, how much do you want to make a bet that the reason Triple H has health problems is because of Vince McMahon? Again, that's just a stupid thing to say. Anybody who is bringing up Triple H's heart or his health as far as Vince McMahon is concerned, causing it or any of that, I don't want to hear any of that. That's not right. Behind the Fiends, also thank you for your channel membership as well. Thank you guys for hanging out with me here on an impromptu stream on a Tuesday afternoon. I thank you. I hope you guys go have dinner if you are East Coast time, or I guess West Coast too. I'm going to go eat some food and figure out what else I have to work on here because the work never ends. So I'll see you guys live tomorrow night right back here on the stream, AEW Dynamite and Tony Khan's big announcement. Until then, take care, guys.